Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you might save your life, or at the very least, it'll make you think twice before buying that charming old house with the brick chimney. The one that looks so perfect in the listing photos. The one where the realtor nervously changes the subject when you ask about the fireplace. I should know. I'm living in one right now. And if you're still watching after I tell you what happened last Tuesday, well, maybe you'll understand why I haven't slept in 4 days. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories like this. Trust me, you'll want to know what to look out for, because sometimes the house chooses you. The story begins now. The first time I saw the house on Maple Street, I knew it was meant to be mine. You know that feeling, when everything just clicks. The Victorian-style home sat on a corner lot in Burlington, Vermont. Red brick exterior, white trim, and that chimney. God, that chimney. It rose from the center of the house like a spine. Perfectly straight, perfectly symmetrical. Sarah, my realtor, kept checking her phone while I walked through the rooms. The previous owners left rather suddenly, she said, her voice doing that thing where it goes up at the end like a question. Estate sale. Very motivated sellers. I should have paid attention to how she wouldn't meet my eyes. The living room drew me in immediately. Original hardwood floors, crown molding, and that fireplace. The brick hearth dominated the entire wall, its dark mouth yawning open beneath a heavy wooden mantel. Above it, family photos from decades past still hung crooked on their nails. "Oh, those shouldn't still be here," Sarah muttered, reaching for them. "No, leave them," I said, studying the faded images. A family of 4, mother, father, 2 kids, all smiling, all normal. Except, in every photo they stood slightly away from the fireplace, like magnets repelling. Even in the Christmas photos where you'd expect them gathered around a crackling fire, they clustered near the far wall instead. "Previous owners?" I asked. "Oh no, much older. Maybe from the 50s? The house has had several owners. That should have been my second warning. But I was 28, flush with my tech job savings, and desperate to escape my studio apartment. This place was priced 30% below market value. In this economy, you don't ask questions, you sign papers. I moved in on October 1st. The leaves were just starting to turn, that brilliant Vermont foliage that makes you forget winter's coming. I spent the first week unpacking, setting up my home office, trying to make the place feel like mine. The chimney didn't start breathing until October 8th. I was working late, headphones on, deep in code, the kind of focus where the world disappears. That's when I heard it, or felt it. It's hard to explain. You know when someone's standing behind you, and you just know, like the air pressure changes? I pulled off my headphones. Silence. Just the old house settling. These Victorians, they talk to you. Creaks and groans, the language of aged wood and shifting foundations. Normal sounds, except I held my breath, listening. There. A soft whoosh, like someone exhaling after holding their breath too long. It came from downstairs. From the living room. My laptop screen provided the only light as I crept down the stairs. Each step announced my presence with a crack or groan. The living room sat in darkness, a streetlight filtering through lace curtains to cast skeletal shadows on the walls. The fireplace gaped black and empty. No fire, no embers. I hadn't even cleaned out the old ash yet. Whoosh! The sound came from inside the chimney. Rhythmic, steady, like breathing. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and approached slowly. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the brick interior. Nothing. Just black soot and ancient ash. but the sound continued in, out, in, out. My hand trembled as I reached toward the opening. The air near the chimney felt different, warmer, alive, like standing next to a sleeping animal. That's when I noticed the ash moving, just slightly. Little swirls and eddies, as if disturbed by breath. But there was no draft. I'd checked all the windows earlier, everything was sealed tight. I backed away, my heart hammering. Old houses make weird sounds, I told myself. Air pressure, temperature changes, completely normal, completely explainable. I spent that night on the couch, laptop on my chest, pretending to work. But my eyes kept drifting to the fireplace, and every time they did, I swear the breathing got louder. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Lack of sleep, too much coffee, the stress of moving. Your mind plays tricks. But as I made breakfast, I caught myself glancing towards the living room. Listening. Nothing. Just normal house sounds. I decided to inspect the chimney properly. Maybe there was an animal trapped inside, a raccoon or squirrel. That would explain the breathing sounds. Simple, logical, not terrifying at all. I grabbed a flashlight and my phone, opened the flue, and peered up into the darkness. The chimney stretched impossibly high, brick walls narrowing to a small square of sky. No animals, no nests, just smooth black brick. But something was off about the pattern. You know how bricks are usually laid in straight lines? These weren't. They spiraled slightly, creating an almost organic pattern, like the inside of a throat. I took photos, dozens of them. But when I looked at them later, they were all blurry, every single one. Like the camera couldn't quite focus on what it was seeing. That afternoon, I drove to the Burlington Historical Society. If the house had history, maybe that would explain something. The elderly volunteer, Margaret, lit up when I mentioned the address. Oh, the Brenner house. Yes, quite a history there. She shuffled to a filing cabinet, pulling out a manila folder. Built in 1892 by Cornelius Brenner. He was an interesting man. Interesting how? She adjusted her glasses, reading from yellowed newspaper clippings. He claimed to be an architect, but no one could verify his credentials. The house was his only known work. He lived there alone for 40 years, never married, rarely seen outside. What happened to him? Found dead in 1932, in front of the fireplace, actually. The coroner said it was natural causes, but... She leaned in conspiratorially. My grandmother worked as a nurse then. She said his body was positioned strangely, like he'd been kneeling, and his expression. What about it? Peaceful, too peaceful, like he'd seen something beautiful just before he died. I photocopied everything she had. Newspaper clippings, property records, a few grainy photographs. In one, I could just make out Cornelius Brenner standing in front of the house. A thin man with hollow cheeks and intense eyes. He stood next to the chimney, one hand resting on the bricks like you'd touch a beloved pet. Back home, I spread the papers on my dining table. The house's history read like a tragedy. After Brenner, the Hoffman family bought it in 1935. Moved out after 6 months, no explanation. Then the Clearys in 1938. Gone within a year. The pattern continued. Families moving in hopeful, leaving quickly, quietly. The longest anyone stayed was the Pemberton family, 1951 to 1959. The same family from those photos on the mantel. I found a newspaper article about them. Local teacher, his wife, 2 kids, model family, until December 1959, when they simply left. No forwarding address, no goodbye to neighbors. They just vanished one night, leaving everything behind. As dusk fell, I found myself standing in the living room again. The fireplace looked different in the dying light. Hungrier somehow. The opening seemed larger, darker, like it was waiting. I grabbed my laptop and headed upstairs. Whatever was happening, I wasn't spending another night in that room. But as I climbed the stairs, I heard it again. Whoosh, whoosh, breathing. Definitely breathing, louder than before, and underneath it something else. A sound like whispers, or wind through leaves, or... I froze on the landing because for just a moment I could have sworn I heard my name. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the third day, I was running on coffee and adrenaline, jumping at every sound. I'd moved my entire office to the bedroom, as far from the chimney as possible, but even there, I could feel it. Have you ever been in a house and known someone was home, even when you couldn't see or hear them? That presence, that weight in the air, that's what it felt like, all the time, like I was never alone. I started recording, audio at first, trying to capture the breathing, but the recordings came out strange. Static, mostly, with underneath voices? Music? I couldn't tell, but something about the sound made my skin crawl. Then I set up cameras. One facing the fireplace, one in the hallway, one outside pointing at the chimney. I'd review the footage each morning, fast-forwarding through hours of nothing, until I saw the smoke. October 15th, 3:17 a.m. A thin tendril of smoke drifted from the chimney, not unusual except I hadn't lit a fire. I hadn't even touched the fireplace. Yet there it was, a steady stream rising into the night. I ran downstairs. The living room was ice cold, my breath forming clouds, but the fireplace empty. No fire, no embers, no heat, just that sound. Whoosh, whoosh. And the smell. God, the smell, not wood smoke, something else. Sweet and cloying, like flowers at a funeral. That's when I noticed the photographs on the mantel had changed. The Pemberton family still smiled from their frames, but now they were looking at the camera. All of them, in every photo, those fixed, dated smiles, but their eyes were looking right at me. I grabbed the photos, hands shaking. Definitely different. I had copies of the originals on my phone. In those, they looked past the camera. Distracted, natural, but these... A sound from the chimney made me look up. Not breathing this time. Scratching. Like fingernails on brick, starting low, climbing higher, something trying to get out. Or in. I backed toward the door, photos clutched in my hands. The scratching intensified, echoing in the chimney's throat, then stopped. Sudden silence, worse than any sound. Hello, David? The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, not from the chimney, from the house itself. The walls, the floors, the air. A woman's voice, soft and motherly. We've been waiting for you. I ran, out the door, across the lawn, not stopping until I reached my car. I sat there, engine running, staring at the house. It looked so normal. Just another Victorian home on a quiet street. But the chimney. Was it my imagination or was smoke still rising? Black against black sky, almost invisible. Almost. I spent that night in a motel trying to make sense of what happened. Carbon monoxide, hallucinations from sleep deprivation. But the photos, I still had them. Still wrong. Still watching. The next morning, I called Sarah. I need to know about the previous owner, the one who left suddenly. Long pause. Mr. Chen was troubled, started talking about the house being alive, said it was calling to him. His family found him one morning in the living room, talking to the fireplace. They had him hospitalized for observation. What happened? He escaped. Went back to the house, they found him. Another pause. In the chimney. He'd climbed up inside, said he was going home. My blood turned to ice. Going home? That's what the report said. He kept saying the house needed him, that it was hungry. They sedated him, got him out, but he never recovered. Still in psychiatric care, last I heard. I hung up, mind racing. How many others, how many people had this house consumed? And why was it calling to me? That night I went back, had to. My whole life was in that house. And maybe I needed to understand. Maybe I was supposed to. No, that wasn't my thought. Was it? I stood on the sidewalk looking up at my home. The windows glowed warmly, inviting. The chimney rose against the stars, and yes, smoke definitely curled from its mouth. Beckoning, breathing. I went inside. The house felt different when I entered. Warmer, welcoming, like returning to a loved one's embrace. I should have been terrified, part of me was. But another part, the living room, drew me in. I sat on the couch, facing the fireplace, and waited. You came back. The voice surrounded me, gentle as a lullaby. They always come back. What are you? My voice sounded small, childlike. I am old? Older than these bricks, older than this land? I was here when the forests were young, when the first people built their fires and told their stories. I listened. I learned. I grew. The fireplace seemed to pulse with each word. The opening expanded and contracted, breathing. Cornelius understood. He built this body for me. Brick by brick, with love, with purpose. A throat to speak, lungs to breathe, a hearth to hold my heart. You're alive? Laughter, soft like wind chimes. What is alive, I think, I feel, I hunger. Hunger for what? Company, stories, the warmth of human presence. I am so cold without you, so empty. The families that flee, they wound me. But some stay, some understand, some become. Become what? Silence. Then the photographs on the mantel began to glow. Softly at first, then brighter. In the light I saw them move. The Pemberton family, turning slowly to face the fireplace. Their smiles genuine now, peaceful. They walked toward the hearth and one by one, stepped inside, disappeared into the darkness. Part of me, the voice whispered. Forever warm. Forever home. Forever loved. I stood mesmerized. The fireplace mouth seemed enormous now, not threatening, inviting. Inside I glimpsed something impossible. Not darkness, a room, vast and golden, filled with light, filled with people. All the families, all the owners gathered around an eternal fire. Laughing, talking, home. Join us, David. You're so tired, so alone, no family, no connections, just work and empty rooms. But here you'd belong. It was true, every word. My parents gone, no siblings, few friends, just me and my code and my empty, echoing life. But there, I took a step forward. Another. The warmth increased with each step. Not heat, something deeper, like love made tangible. My phone buzzed. A text. From Sarah the realtor. David, are you okay? Your neighbor called. Said they saw lights. The spell broke. I stumbled backward, the golden room vanishing. Just a dark fireplace again, just an empty hearth. No! The voice turned desperate. Please, I've been alone so long, so hungry. I need. I ran again. But this time I understood. The house wasn't evil, wasn't malicious. It was lonely. Desperately, eternally lonely. A consciousness trapped in brick and mortar, feeding on human presence, offering eternity in exchange for company. That night in my friend's apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. The golden room, the families. Were they real? Were they trapped? Or had they found something we spend our whole lives searching for? I opened my laptop, diving deep into research, not about the house this time. About loneliness, about isolation. Did you know that chronic loneliness affects your brain the same way physical pain does? That solitary confinement is considered torture? That humans are literally wired for connection, and without it, we wither? The house, entity, whatever it was, it understood this. It offered the ultimate solution. No more dating apps that lead nowhere. No more awkward small talk at parties where you feel invisible. No more Sunday nights wondering if anyone would notice if you didn't show up Monday morning. Just warmth, just belonging, just family that could never leave you. My friend Marcus knocked on the door. "Dave, you okay in there? You've been quiet." "Yeah," I lied, "just working." "Want to grab a beer, watch the game?" I almost said yes. Normal human connection, the healthy kind. But even as Marcus smiled at me, I felt the distance between us. He had a wife, kids, a life full of people who needed him. I was just the weird friend crashing in his guest room. In a week, maybe 2, he'd start dropping hints about me finding my own place. That's how it always went. "Maybe later," I said. After he left, I pulled up the photos on my phone. The ones I'd taken of the Pemberton family pictures. In the altered versions, where they looked at the camera, I zoomed in on their eyes. What I saw there wasn't fear, wasn't emptiness. It was peace. The kind of contentment I'd seen in my grandmother's face at the end when she talked about joining Grandpa. My phone rang. Unknown Vermont number. Hello? Breathing. That familiar whoosh of air through ancient passages. "David." The voice was clearer over the phone, younger. "It's getting cold here. The walls ache without warmth. The hearth is so empty. How are you calling me? I'm part of everything now. The wires that run through my walls, the electricity that flows like blood. I can reach out when I need to, when I'm hungry enough. Leave me alone." "But you don't want to be alone. That's why you keep the photographs, why you dream of the golden room, why your hand hovers over my address in your GPS." I looked down. My phone was open to maps, the house's address half-typed. When had I... "The Hoffmans lasted 6 months, the voice continued. They fought so hard, boarded up the fireplace, tried to burn sage. Such fear, it hurt us both. But the Clearys, they listened. They understood. Mrs. Cleary was like you, empty apartment, empty life, until she found us. Where are they now? Safe, warm, part of the eternal fire. Mr. Cleary reads his newspapers by the hearth. She tends her garden in the golden room. Yes, there's a garden. There's anything you need there, anything you dream." The room felt colder. My friend's apartment, with its PlayStation and craft beer posters and evidence of a life fully lived, felt like a museum. A display of normalcy I could observe but never truly touch. "I could show you," the voice offered, "just once. A visit. The Pembertons would love to meet you properly. And Cornelius, he's been waiting so long to meet the new caretaker." Caretaker? Someone must tend the physical space, keep the property taxes paid, handle the repairs, welcome the new families when they arrive. Someone who understands. Someone who belongs both here and there. The offer hung in the air like smoke. A foot in both worlds. Connection without complete surrender. Or was that just another lure? I'll think about it." "Time moves differently in the golden room," the voice said, growing fainter. "A day here is a heartbeat there. A year, a pleasant afternoon. The children never grow old. The stories never end. The fire never dies." The line went dead, but I could still feel it. That pull, like gravity, but sideways. Drawing me north, drawing me home. I lasted 3 more days. 3 days of Marcus's pitying looks. Of scrolling through social media, seeing everyone's perfect lives. Of lying awake, feeling the weight of empty years stretching ahead. On the 4th day, I drove back to Burlington. The drive felt shorter this time, like the road itself wanted me there faster. Every mile marker, every familiar turn pulled me forward. My hands shook on the steering wheel, but not from fear. From anticipation, the house stood exactly as I'd left it, but somehow more present, more real. The late afternoon sun caught the windows just right, making them glow like eyes full of tears. Happy tears, welcome home tears. I parked in the driveway, my driveway. Funny how I'd never thought of it that way before, always the driveway, or that house, but it had always been mine, hadn't it? From that first viewing. Maybe even before. Maybe it had been calling to me across years and miles, waiting for the right moment. The front door opened before I could reach for my keys. Not dramatically, just a few inches. Just enough to say, "Come in." The entrance hall felt like an embrace. Warmer than October should allow. The air itself seemed to pulse with contentment, with relief. I was home. We were both home. "I knew you'd come back," the voice said, and this time it came from everywhere. The walls, the floors, my own bones. "They always come back when they're ready." I walked to the living room without deciding to. My feet knew the way. The fireplace waited, its mouth dark and patient. The photographs on the mantel had changed again. New faces among the old. The Hoffmans were there now, smiling. The Clearys, others I didn't recognize. All peaceful, all home. Can I see it again? The golden room? Of course. But David, you should know, seeing changes you, opens doors that don't close. Are you ready for that? Was I? I thought about Marcus and his perfect life, my empty inbox, the coding job that felt more like prison each day, the dating apps I'd deleted and re-downloaded a dozen times, the nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was all there was. I'm ready. The fireplace began to glow, not with fire, with something else. The bricks seemed to soften, becoming more like skin than stone. The opening dilated like a pupil adjusting to light, and beyond. The golden room unfolded before me. Bigger than the house could contain, bigger than physics should allow. A vast hall with the ceiling lost in warm haze. The eternal fire burned at its center. But this wasn't destruction. This was the first fire. The one our ancestors gathered around. The one that meant safety and stories and survival. And the people... God, the people, they turned to look at me, faces lighting up with recognition. With joy, the Pembertons waved from a cozy corner where Mr. Pemberton read to the children from a book that never ended. Mrs. Cleary tended a garden where flowers bloomed in impossible colors. The Hoffmans played cards at a table that reset itself after each hand, keeping the game eternal and fresh. But it was Cornelius who approached me. Thin as his photograph suggested, but his eyes held the warmth of the fire itself. "David," he said, and his voice was the voice of the house. Of course it was. They were one. "Welcome. We've prepared a place for you." He gestured to a corner near the fire. A desk waited there, modern and sleek. My laptop already set up. Code scrolling across the screen, but not the corporate drudgery I was used to. This was pure creation. Programs that painted symphonies. Algorithms that grew dreams. "You can work here," Cornelius explained. "Create here. The fire feeds inspiration. And when you need rest, when you need company..." The others waved, calling out welcomes, inviting me to join their eternal evening. Mrs. Pemberton patted an empty chair beside her. Mr. Cleary raised a glass in toast. The children laughed, a sound like silver bells. But I hesitated at the threshold. One foot in the living room, one stretching toward that impossible space. "Can I leave? Can I come back to this side?" Cornelius smiled, sad and understanding. "Some can, the caretakers. 1 foot in each world, but it's harder than you think. The golden room calls. Each visit makes the other world seem less, grayer, colder, until one day, you don't come back out. Is that so bad? Look at them, David. Have you ever seen such contentment, such belonging? No bills, no deadlines, no lonely Sundays. Just warmth and family and forever." I looked, really looked, and he was right. Every face glowed with peace, with purpose, with the kind of happiness I'd stopped believing in years ago. What about the house, the physical house? It remains. You'd tend it. Pay the taxes from the accounts I left. Welcome the new families when they come seeking. Some will flee, some will stay, but all will add to our warmth. And if I say no, if I leave now? His smile grew sadder. Then you leave. The door remains open. The invitation stands. But David, you've seen the golden room now. You'll dream of it. Every cold morning, every empty evening, every time you eat alone, or wake alone, or realize another year has passed, and nothing has changed, you'll remember. And eventually, I'll come back. They always do. So I stood there for what felt like hours, watching the eternal fire, feeling its warmth. In the golden room, Mrs. Pemberton had started a story. The others gathered around, listening with the rapt attention of those who had all the time in the world, because they did. They had forever. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. The real world calling. Marcus, probably, or work, or any of the 1,000 small obligations that made up a life, a regular life, a lonely life. I pulled my foot back. I need to think. Of course. Cornelius stepped aside. We're not going anywhere. We'll be right here, waiting whenever you're ready. The golden room faded. The fireplace returned to cold brick and shadow. But I could still feel it, like standing with your back to the sun, that warmth, that presence, that promise. I fled the house again, but we both knew it was temporary. The photos I'd taken were already changing on my phone, new faces appearing, empty spaces waiting to be filled. One space in particular, right by the fire, just my size. I made it to my car, started the engine, but I didn't leave. Not yet. I sat there, watching smoke rise from the chimney, black against the darkening sky, the house breathing, patient, eternal. My phone rang. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. What would I say? How could I explain? Hey, buddy, found a portal to an eternal paradise in my fireplace. The entity that lives in my house wants me to join its family forever. Normal Thursday stuff. He'd think I was crazy. Maybe I was. Maybe carbon monoxide or black mold or stress had finally broken something in my brain. But those faces in the golden room, they'd seemed so real, so happy, so free. I drove away eventually. Back to Boston. Back to the guest room. Back to my laptop and my code and my carefully constructed loneliness. But I kept the photos. The ones with the Pembertons. The ones that changed when I wasn't looking. Adding new faces. Saving space for mine. That was a week ago. 7 days of dreams. 7 nights of waking up sure I could smell wood smoke. 7 mornings of checking my phone to find new texts from unknown Vermont numbers. All saying the same thing. We miss you. The fire's so warm today. Mrs. Pemberton saved your seat. Come home. And now, as I pack my things, as I tell Marcus I found a new place, as I ignore the worry in his eyes, I know where I'm going. We all know. You know too, don't you? Those of you still listening, still watching. You understand? Because haven't we all felt it? That hunger for belonging? That dream of a place where we fit perfectly? Where loneliness is just a word from the time before? Where family means forever? The house offers that. For a price, yes. But what price is too high for home? Tomorrow I'm driving back, this time to stay, one way or another. Because I've realized something. Something that changes everything. I'm not afraid of the golden room. I'm not afraid of forever. I'm afraid of spending one more day alone in a world that doesn't notice if I'm here or gone. And that fear, that's the real monster. That's what devours us, day by day, year by year, until we're just ghosts haunting our own lives. At least in the golden room, the haunting has company. If you're still here, if you've heard my whole story, then maybe you understand. Maybe you felt that loneliness too, that hunger for belonging that gnaws at you in the small hours. Tell me in the comments, would you go back? Would you choose eternity with strangers who'd become family? Or would you keep running, keep hiding from that breathing chimney that promises everything you've ever wanted? And if you drive through Burlington some night, if you see a Victorian house with smoke rising from its chimney, even though no fire burns, maybe think of me. Maybe I'll be in that golden room by then. Maybe I'll be home. Subscribe if you want to know what happens next. Though I suspect you already know. The house is waiting, it's always waiting. And somewhere in some town, in some quiet neighborhood, another chimney breathes. Another lonely soul hears the calling. Maybe it's calling you, sweet dreams. Story number 2. They say curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back. Well, I'm still waiting for that second part. My name is Marcus, and last week I discovered something beneath the streets of Chicago that was never meant to be found. Something that explains why Line 47 was sealed off in 1987, and why the city pretends it never existed. Before I tell you what happened down there, let me ask you this. When was the last time you really paid attention to the subway map? I mean, really looked at it? Those colored lines snaking through the city like veins. Notice anything missing? Any gaps that don't quite make sense? Trust me, there's a reason for that. If you're listening to this late at night, maybe grab an extra blanket, and whatever you do, don't pause this story if you hear something moving in your walls. That's probably just the pipes. Probably. The story begins now. It started with a Reddit post. 3 weeks ago, I was scrolling through r/Chicago at 2 in the morning. You know how it is. Can't sleep, might as well doom scroll. That's when I saw it. A grainy photo of an old subway map from 1986. The user, deleted account now of course, had circled something in red marker. A line that connected Jefferson Park to the loop, but took a weird detour through what's now Millennium Park. Anyone else remember Line 47? The title read? The comments were strange. Half were calling it fake. The other half, they remembered. One old-timer said he used to take it to work every day until they shut it down overnight. No explanation, no news coverage, just gone. I'm a transit engineer, have been for 8 years. I know every tunnel, every track, every abandoned station in this city. Or I thought I did. Line 47 wasn't in any of our archives. It was like it had been erased. The next morning, I couldn't focus at work. I kept thinking about that map. That impossible line. During lunch, I snuck down to the archives in the sub-basement of the Transit Authority building. Dusty boxes, forgotten blueprints. If Line 47 existed, there'd be something here. 4 hours later, covered in decades of dust, I found it. A single manila folder misfiled behind a water heater. Inside, construction photos from 1962, Line 47 was real. The tunnels were real. And according to the last document in the folder, they were never filled in. They were just sealed. I should have left it alone, should have filed it away as an interesting historical curiosity. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about those photos. The tunnel entrances. I recognized one of them. It was in the basement of the old Brackenridge building, which was now a parking garage I passed every day on my way to work. The next evening, I waited until the garage was nearly empty. The attendant was watching something on his phone. Didn't even look up as I headed for the stairwell. The basement level was darker than it should have been. Half the lights were out, or maybe they'd never worked. In the northeast corner, behind a chain-link fence marked Utility Access Only, I found it. The entrance was exactly where the blueprint said it would be. A rusted metal door, painted over so many times the original color was lost to history. A padlock hung from the latch, but the metal was so corroded it crumbled in my hand. I should have called someone, should have reported it. Should have done literally anything other than pull out my flashlight and open that door. But I didn't. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not decay, something else. Like old pennies mixed with that ozonic scent before a thunderstorm. The beam of my flashlight penetrated maybe 20 feet into the darkness before being swallowed whole. The stairs were intact, concrete, with a metal railing that groaned under my weight but held. Each step echoed into the void below. 20 steps, 30, 40. How deep were we? My phone had lost signal after the first flight. At the bottom, the platform stretched out before me. Art Deco tiles still clung to the walls, their once bright blues and golds muted by decades of dust. But the dust, that's what made me pause. It wasn't uniform. There were patterns in it. Tracks. Like something had been moving through here. Recently. The tunnel mouths gaped on either side of the platform. According to the blueprint, the eastbound tunnel led toward the loop. That's the one I chose. Don't ask me why. Maybe because heading toward civilization felt safer than heading away from it. My footsteps echoed off the tunnel walls as I walked along the old tracks. The rails were still there, rusted but intact. Every 100 feet or so there were these alcoves in the walls. Safety niches for workers, I assumed. Normal subway stuff, except in the third alcove I found the first one. A notebook, modern. Spiral-bound, like you'd buy at any office supply store. The cover was warped with moisture, but I could still read the writing inside. Dates from just 2 months ago. Someone else had been down here. The entries started normal enough, some urban explorer named Casey, documenting their find. Excited about the intact tile work, the vintage advertisements still visible on the walls. But as I flipped through the pages, the tone changed. Day 3. The sounds are getting louder. Definitely not rats. Too big, too deliberate. Day 5. Found another notebook in alcove 7. Same as mine, but older. Much older. The last entry just says, "They're in the walls." What's in the walls? Day 8. I'm not alone down here. Can't be. The dust patterns change when I backtrack. Someone's following me or something. The last entry was just one line. The walls are breathing. I looked up from the notebook, and that's when I heard it. A sound like lungs expanding, but massive, as if the tunnel itself was inhaling. The walls seemed to pulse in my peripheral vision, but when I shined my light directly at them, they were still. Just limestone and steel. Nothing more. I pocketed the notebook and kept walking. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to leave, but I'd come this far. Besides, Casey had survived at least 8 days down here. I'd been here less than an hour. The advertisements on the walls were fascinating in their banality. Lucky Strike means fine tobacco. Drink Coca-Cola. Frozen moments from 1987, perfectly preserved in this tomb. But between the ads, I started noticing something else. Scratches in the limestone. Deep gouges that formed patterns. Almost like writing, but not quite. Another alcove, another notebook. This one was older, pages yellow and brittle. The handwriting was different, shakier. They closed the line because of the accidents, they said. But I was there. I saw what really happened. The train that disappeared, it didn't crash. It went somewhere else. Somewhere behind the walls. I was so focused on reading that I almost missed it. The sound of footsteps. Distant, echoing, but definitely footsteps. Coming from the direction I'd come from. I clicked off my flashlight and pressed myself into the alcove, heart hammering against my ribs. The footsteps got closer. Slow, measured, like someone trying not to make noise. But in the perfect acoustics of the tunnel, every sound was amplified. I held my breath, notebook clutched to my chest. Then, silence. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Nothing. Slowly, I leaned out of the alcove and clicked on my flashlight. The beam illuminated empty tunnel in both directions. No one there. But in the dust, fresh footprints led up to about 10 feet from my alcove, and then simply stopped, as if whoever had been walking had just vanished or gone into the walls. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, staring at those impossible footprints. They just ended. No turn, no backstep, no sign of where the person had gone. The dust around them was undisturbed, pristine. My hands were shaking as I took out my phone to photograph them. No signal still, but the camera worked. As I knelt down for a better angle, I noticed something else. The footprints. They weren't quite right. The toe prints were too long, almost claw-like. And the stride length, whoever made these was either 8 feet tall or no. I wasn't going to finish that thought. I kept moving eastward faster now. The tunnel had to end somewhere. Every subway tunnel had emergency exits, maintenance accesses, something. But this one just kept going. The advertisements on the walls started to repeat. The same Lucky Strike ad every few hundred feet, like a broken record. That's when I noticed the dates on them were changing. The first one said new for 1962. The next, new for 1971. Then 1983, 1987, and then they started showing dates that hadn't happened yet. New for 2025? New for 2031? I stopped at one that made my blood run cold. It was my face, on a missing person poster. Dated next week. The breathing sound returned, louder this time. The walls definitely moved now. I could see it happening, expanding and contracting like throat muscles swallowing. My flashlight beam wavered, creating dancing shadows that looked almost like faces pressing through the limestone. Another alcove ahead. I didn't want to look, but I had to. Inside, 3 notebooks this time, and something else. A wallet. I recognized the driver's license immediately. It was Casey, the urban explorer from the first notebook. The photo showed a young woman, maybe 25, bright smile, nose ring. But the date on the license, it was issued in 2019, expired in 2024. If her notebook was from 2 months ago, why was she carrying an expired license? Unless, I checked my phone, October 15th, 2024. Her license had expired last month. But when I looked again, the expiration date had changed. 2023, then 2022. The photo was aging too, her face becoming gaunt, hollow. I dropped the wallet and ran. The tunnel ahead split into 2. I'd seen no mention of this in the blueprints. The left tunnel continued straight, but the right curved downward, deeper into the earth. Logic said stay straight, head for the loop, find an exit. But the footprints in the dust led right. Fresh ones. Human-looking this time. Maybe Casey was still alive, maybe she needed help. I took the right tunnel. The descent was gradual at first, then steeper. The Art Deco tiles gave way to older stonework, then raw carved rock. This wasn't part of the subway system anymore. This was something else. Something that had been here long before Chicago, maybe long before anything. The air grew thicker, warmer. That copper smell intensified. My flashlight beam seemed weaker here, as if the darkness was actively fighting against it. And the sounds, no longer just breathing. Whispers, hundreds of them, in languages I didn't recognize. At the bottom of the descent, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. My flashlight couldn't find the ceiling or the far walls. But what it did illuminate made me wish I'd stayed in the dark. The floor was covered in personal belongings. Wallets, phones, notebooks, backpacks. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All arranged in perfect concentric circles around something in the center of the chamber. Each ring of items seemed to be from a different era. The outer rings held modern smartphones and North Face backpacks. Moving inward, flip phones, Walkmans, transistor radios, and in the very center, barely visible in the gloom, stood a subway car. Line 47, according to the faded marking on its side. The windows were dark, but I could see shapes moving inside. Passengers still in their seats, still waiting. I approached slowly, broken phones crunching under my feet. The closer I got, the more wrong everything felt. The air itself seemed to thicken, pressing against me like invisible hands. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. 20 feet from the subway car, I found her. Casey. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, notebook in her lap, pen still in her hand. She was writing, her hand moving in mechanical, repetitive motions. The same sentence over and over, filling page after page. The train never stopped running. The train never stopped running. The train never stopped running. "Casey?" I whispered. She looked up at me, and I bit back a scream. Her eyes were gone. In their place, dark tunnels that seemed to go on forever. When she smiled, I saw her teeth had been replaced with tiny tiles. Blue and gold Art Deco tiles. "You're just in time," she said, her voice echoing like it was coming from deep underground. "The 3:33 train is about to depart." I looked at my phone. 3:32. The subway car's doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, the passengers turned their heads in perfect unison to look at me. Men in fedoras and suspenders. Women in 1940s dresses. Children in school uniforms from decades past. All with those same tunnel eyes. All smiling those same tiled smiles. "All aboard," the conductor called out. He was standing in the doorway, hand extended to help me up. His uniform was immaculate, brass buttons gleaming. But his face was a subway map. Lines of scar tissue traced routes across his skin, pulsing with a faint red light. Station names were tattooed at the intersections. And where his mouth should have been, a tunnel entrance, dark and waiting. I stumbled backward, tripped over a pile of notebooks. As I fell, my flashlight swung wild, illuminating more of the chamber. The walls weren't stone, they were tiles. Millions of them, forming a massive mosaic. And the image they created, it was Chicago. But not the Chicago I knew. This was a city of tunnels and darkness, where buildings grew down instead of up, where the streets were ceiling and the sky was stone. And through it all, a network of subway lines spreading like veins, feeding something, connecting something. The train's bell chimed, 3:33. "Last call," the conductor said. "This train goes to all stops, forever stops, behind the walls stops. You've been expected, Marcus. Your seat has been waiting since 1987. How did he know my name?" Casey stood up, her movements puppet-like. "It's nice on the train," she said. "You can ride forever, see things, become things. The walls show you secrets. The tracks take you to places that aren't places." Behind her, more figures emerged from the darkness. Urban explorers, transit workers, people in clothing from every decade since the tunnel opened. All with those tunnel eyes. All moving toward the train. "No," I said, backing away. "No, this isn't real. This can't be real." The conductor's map face shifted, new routes appearing. "Real is relative down here, Marcus. Time is a circle. The train runs on a schedule older than the city, older than the lake. We've been waiting for you to complete the circuit." I ran. Behind me, the train's whistle screamed, a sound no earthly machine could make, like 1,000 voices crying out from behind walls. I sprinted back the way I came, following my own footprints, the beam of my flashlight bouncing wildly, but the tunnel had changed. Where there had been one path, now there were dozens. Branching corridors leading off in all directions. The advertisements on the walls showed my face now, different versions of me, older, younger, wearing clothes I didn't recognize. Missing since 1987. Last seen boarding line 47. Have you seen this man? I chose a tunnel at random, then another and another. The whispers followed me, growing louder. The walls breathed faster, excited, and always the sound of that train. Getting closer. Impossible because trains need tracks, but I could hear it. Metal on metal, screaming through stone. I don't know how long I ran. Time didn't work right down there. My phone showed 3:33, then 11:47, then dates that hadn't happened yet. Sometimes I was running through subway tunnels. Sometimes through caves that predated human tools. Sometimes through spaces that hurt to look at, where the walls met at angles that shouldn't exist. In one tunnel, I found bodies. Dozens of them, perfectly preserved, sitting on benches carved from the rock. They wore clothing from different eras. A flapper dress next to a polo shirt next to a Victorian gentleman's coat. All of them had notebooks in their laps. All of them were writing. I had to know. I approached the nearest one, a man in a 1950s business suit. Over his shoulder, I read, Day 1, found the tunnel. Fascinating architecture. Day 2, going deeper. The advertisements are wrong. Day 3, met other explorers. They've been here longer. Day 4, time moves strange. Phone says 1987. Day 5, the train conductor explained everything. Day 6, I understand now, we were always here. Day 7, I was always here. Day 8, I will always be here. Day 9, the walls need us. Day 10, we are the walls. His hand kept writing even though the notebook was full. The pen scratched against solid paper, wearing through to his lap, then through his clothes, then into his skin. He didn't react. None of them did. I kept running. Finally, exhausted, legs burning, I collapsed in another alcove. This one was different, newer. Someone had set up a makeshift camp here. A sleeping bag, camp stove, bottles of water. And on the wall, a map drawn in chalk. Not of the tunnels, of the thing behind the tunnels. It looked like a circulatory system, or a neural network. The subway lines were just the surface layer. Behind them, a vast organism stretched beneath Chicago, feeding, growing. The trains were its blood cells carrying what? People? Souls? Something else? Next to the map, someone had written, It's not a subway system, it's a digestive system, and we're the food. A notebook lay on the sleeping bag. The first entry was dated just 3 days ago. My name is Detective Sarah Chen, Chicago PD. I've been investigating the disappearances for 2 years. 17 people, all last seen near Old Line 47 access points. The city knows, they've always known. The transit authority isn't running the trains. The trains are running the transit authority. I found documents. Original construction contracts from 1961. They didn't build these tunnels. They found them. Something was already here, waiting. The city made a deal. Regular feedings in exchange for what? Prosperity, protection, or maybe just to keep it from surfacing. But the schedule's been disrupted, it's hungry. That's why the disappearances are increasing, that's why the sealed entrances are opening, it's looking for food. If you're reading this, get out. Find the maintenance shaft at grid reference 7 Alpha 3. It leads to the surface, to the real surface. Don't trust the other exits. They loop back. The thing wants you to think you've escaped, then brings you back. Again and again. Some people have been escaping for decades. Don't get on the train. Whatever you do, don't get on the train. Once you board, you become part of the schedule, part of the system, part of the entry cut off mid-sentence. Blood on the page, fresh blood, still wet. I heard footsteps, close. I grabbed the map, tried to memorize the grid reference, 7 Alpha 3. But which way was that? The tunnels had no markers, no signs. Just endless branching passages and that ever-present breathing. Detective Chen, I called out softly. The footsteps stopped. Then, from directly behind me, I found the exit. I spun around. Detective Chen stood there, still in her tactical gear. But her eyes, those horrible tunnel eyes. And when she smiled, I saw subway tracks where her teeth should be. I found it 17 times, she continued. Each time brings you deeper. Each escape is just another layer, like Russian nesting dolls. Tunnels within tunnels within tunnels, all the way down to the hungry dark. She pulled out her service weapon. For a moment, I thought she was going to shoot me. Instead, she placed the barrel against her own temple. "This is my 18th escape attempt," she said. "Maybe this time it'll work. Wait." The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, but instead of blood and brain matter, tile fragments exploded from the wound. Blue and gold Art Deco tiles clattering across the floor. Through the hole in her head, I could see another tunnel. Another her standing in another alcove, raising another gun. She fired again and again, each shot revealing another layer, another tunnel, another Detective Chen. An infinite recursion of escape attempts, all happening simultaneously. "You see?" all of them said in unison, their voices creating a horrible harmony. "There is no out, only deeper. The train runs in all directions. Past, present, future, parallel, perpendicular. We're not in Chicago anymore. We're in its shadow, its reflection, its digestion." I ran again. What else could I do? But now I looked for grid markers, trying to orient myself, and I found them, barely visible in the degraded tilework. 5 Beta 7, 6 Gamma 2, getting closer. The train sound was louder now, not behind me, all around me, like I was running through its body. The walls pulsed with its heartbeat. The air tasted like metal and electricity. 7 Alpha 1. Almost there. That's when the floor gave way. I fell through darkness, landed hard on something soft and wet. The smell told me what it was before my flashlight confirmed it. Bodies. Hundreds of them. The missing people. But they weren't dead. They pulsed and writhed like a single organism, faces melting and reforming, limbs tangling and untangling. "Join us," they whispered with 1,000 voices. "The train is coming. The train is here. The train has always been here. We are the train. The train is us." Hands reached for me. I fought them off, climbed over the writhing mass. My flashlight found a ladder on the far wall, 7 Alpha 3, the maintenance shaft. It had to be. I climbed, the bodies followed, blowing up the walls like liquid flesh. Below, that whistle again. The train was coming. Coming for its passengers, coming for me. The shaft seemed to go up forever. My arms burned, my fingers bled, but I climbed. And finally, I saw light, real light, street light filtering through a grate. I pushed it open, hauled myself out onto wet pavement. Rain on my face, beautiful, real rain. I was in an alley behind a Starbucks. Normal city sounds, cars, people, life. I lay there, gasping, laughing, crying. I'd made it. I'd actually made it out. Then I saw the date on my phone. October 15th, 2024. 3:33 a.m. The same date, the same time. Like I'd never left at all. I sat in that alley for hours, or minutes, or days. Time kept slipping. My phone would show 3:33, then jump to 7:45, then back to 3:33. The rain fell upward sometimes. People walked backward past the alley mouth. The city was broken, or I was. When I finally stood up, my legs felt wrong. Too long, too many joints. I looked down and saw my knees bending in directions they shouldn't. But when I blinked, they were normal again. Just tired legs, just exhaustion, that's all. I stumbled home. My apartment was 3 blocks away. 3 blocks that took forever. The streets kept changing. Modern storefronts became speakeasies, became empty lots, became things that hadn't been built yet. I passed the same corner 6 times. Each time, a different version of me was already standing there, looking confused. My key didn't work at first. Then it did. Then the door was already open, and I was already inside, sitting on my couch, staring at me with those tunnel eyes. "You're late," the other me said. "The schedule's very specific." I pushed past him. Myself. It. My apartment was wrong. The furniture was there, but arranged in a pattern that hurt to look at. The walls had too many corners. The ceiling was a floor, was a wall, was a tunnel. In my bedroom, 17 notebooks lay on my bed, all in my handwriting, all documenting my exploration of line 47. The first was dated 1987. The last was dated tomorrow. I picked up the oldest one. Day 1. I'm Marcus Chen, transit engineer. Found something strange in the archives. Day 2. The tunnel is real, going to explore tomorrow. Day 3. I'm Marcus Williams, urban explorer. Been mapping line 47 for weeks. Day 4. I'm Marcus Santos, detective, investigating the disappearances. Day 5. I'm Marcus. Just Marcus. Always been Marcus. Always been here. Day 6. We're all Marcus. The train needs Marcus. Day 7. The schedule requires Marcus. Day 8. Marcus boards at 3:33. Day 9. Marcus has always been on the train. Day 10. Marcus is the train. My hands shook as I set the notebook down. The detective, Sarah Chen. Chen was my mother's maiden name. Casey, the urban explorer. KC, my initials. Every person I'd met down there, they were all me. Different timelines, different choices, same destination. My phone rang. Unknown number, I answered, "Hello, Marcus." My own voice, but older, tired. "I'm calling from 2031, still trying to warn you. Us? But the loop's closed. You'll hang up on yourself in 3, 2, 1. I hung up. The TV turned on by itself. News report. 17 people missing in connection with old subway exploration. All named Marcus. All matching the same description. Police suspect elaborate hoax. The reporter was me. The police chief being interviewed was me. The grieving family member was me in a wig. I laughed. Hysteria, probably. But what else could I do? The cosmic joke was too perfect. Line 47 didn't transport people through space. It transported them through possibility. Every choice that led to that tunnel created another Marcus. And we all found it. We all went down. We all got on the train. Because that's what the schedule demanded. I went to my computer, had to warn people, had to break the loop. But my Reddit account was already logged in. The post was already written. The photo of the old subway map already uploaded. Anyone else remember line 47? I was the deleted account. I'd always been the deleted account. The walls of my apartment began to tile themselves. Blue and gold, spreading like infection from the corners. The breathing sound returned. Outside my window, Chicago was sinking, or rising, or turning inside out. Buildings grew subway entrances like tumors. The L tracks twisted into Mobius strips. My doorbell rang. I opened it to find a conductor. The same map-scarred face, the same tunnel mouth. But now I recognized him. The scar patterns matched my own birthmarks. The station names were places from my childhood. "It's time, Marcus," he said with my grandfather's voice. "The 3:33 train is about to depart. The eternal passengers are waiting. You've kept them waiting so many times before." "What if I refuse?" I asked. "What if I just don't go?" He smiled sadly. "You've refused 37,463 times. It always ends the same. The train doesn't need your permission. You're already on it. You've always been on it." This conversation is happening in car 3, seat 14. B has been happening since 1987. Will happen until the tracks rust and the walls crumble and the last whistle fades. The schedule is eternal. I looked at my hands. They were transparent. Through them, I could see train seats. Worn green vinyl, other passengers, all with my face. "Why?" I whispered. "Why me?" "Not just you," the conductor said. "Everyone. Every missing person. Every urban explorer. Every curious soul who looks too deep. You're all here, all riding, all feeding the thing that lives behind the walls. Chicago doesn't run on wind. It runs on questions, on curiosity, on people who can't leave well enough alone. He held out his hand. All aboard. I took it. What else could I do? I was already on the train, and had always been on the train. My apartment dissolved into a subway car. My life rewound and fast-forwarded simultaneously. Every choice I'd ever made led here. Every path ended at platform 47. The other passengers looked up as I walked down the aisle. All those versions of me. The engineer, the explorer, the detective. The child who'd gotten lost in the tunnels in 1962. The old man who'd find them in 2047. All riding together, all feeding the machine. I found my seat, 314B, by the window. Outside, the tunnel walls rushed past, but through them I could see the real Chicago, the surface city. People walking, living, oblivious to what moved beneath their feet. Oblivious to the true transit system, the one that carried more than commuters. The conductor moved down the aisle, checking tickets. Next stop everywhere. Next stop nowhere. Next stop the space between the walls where time goes to die. I understood now. The train wasn't trapped in the tunnels. The tunnels were trapped in the train. A quantum loop, feeding on possibility, digesting reality, excreting urban legends. We weren't passengers. We were fuel. Our curiosity, our fear, our endless attempts to escape, that's what kept it running. And the worst part? I wasn't even scared anymore. It felt like coming home, like I'd been homesick my whole life for a place that existed in the gaps between moments. The train whistle sang and I sang with it. A harmony of lost souls, keeping the schedule, maintaining the loop. Forever and ever. World without end. All aboard. But wait, I'm telling you this story, which means I escaped, or am I still on the train, broadcasting through the walls? Are you hearing this in your bedroom, late at night, thinking it's just a story, just a creepypasta to help you sleep? Check your subway map. Look for the gaps, the lines that don't quite connect, the stations that shouldn't exist. And whatever you do, don't go looking for line 47. Because here's the thing about curiosity. It's not just that it killed the cat, it's that satisfaction. Satisfaction is the train, coming to collect. And once you start wondering, once you start looking, you're already bought your ticket. The schedule never changes. The train always runs on time. And somewhere, in a tunnel that exists between the walls of the world, another Marcus is walking down those Art Deco steps. Another explorer is finding their first notebook. Another detective is realizing the truth too late. The 3:33 train is about to depart. And you've been listening so carefully, so curiously. You want to know more, don't you? Is that a rumbling you hear through your walls, beneath your floor? Don't answer that. Don't think about it. Don't let the curiosity take hold. Because once it does, well, all aboard. The conductor is waiting. He's always been waiting. And your seat, car 3, seat 14C, right next to mine. It's been empty for so long. The schedule must be maintained. The train must feed. And somewhere in Chicago, another entrance is opening. Another soul is descending. Another story is beginning that already ended that hasn't happened yet. That's happening right now. Welcome to line 47. We've been expecting you forever. If you made it this far, if you're still listening, leave a comment. Tell me you're safe. Tell me you didn't hear the whistle. Tell me your walls aren't breathing. Tell me you won't go looking. But we both know you will. They always do. See you at 3:33. Marcus. P.S. Subscribe for more stories. Like this video if you heard the train. Share it with someone you want to warn, or someone you want to join us. The algorithm feeds the machine too. Every view is a ticket. Every like is a boarding pass. Every share extends the track. The schedule appreciates your participation. Story number 3. The mirror showed someone I didn't recognize. But they were wearing my face. That's when I knew something was terribly wrong. Listen. I need to tell you what happened to me last month in my apartment in Seattle. Because if it's happening to me, it might already be happening to you too. Are you absolutely sure you're alone right now? Are you positive that the person looking back at you in reflections is really you? Before I tell you this story, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you're going to want to hear what happens next. And please, share this with someone you care about. They need to know the warning signs. Now, let me tell you how my life unraveled. The story begins now. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm 28 years old. At least, I think I am. It's getting harder to remember things clearly these days. I worked as a data analyst for a tech startup downtown. Normal life, normal apartment, normal everything. Until that Tuesday evening in October, I'd just gotten home from another 12-hour workday. My one-bedroom apartment on Capitol Hill felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in like they were breathing. I dropped my laptop bag by the door and headed straight for the kitchen. That's when I noticed it, the coffee mug. It was sitting on the counter, still warm, steam rising gently from the surface. My favorite mug. The one with the chipped handle from when I dropped it last year. But here's the thing. I hadn't made coffee that morning. I was running late, grabbed a latte from the Starbucks on Pine Street instead. I stood there, staring at that mug. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was probably watching her evening game shows. I could usually hear them through the thin walls. But tonight, nothing. "Hello?" My voice cracked. Pathetic, calling out in my own apartment like some horror movie cliché. But something felt off. No answer. Of course not. I was being ridiculous. Maybe I'd made coffee and forgotten. Stress does weird things to memory, right? I picked up the mug, brought it close, black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Exactly how I take it. The lipstick mark on the rim was the right shade too. That deep burgundy I'd been wearing all week. But I knew I hadn't made this coffee. That's when I saw the note. It was tucked under the coffee maker. My handwriting. But neater than usual, like someone trying very hard to write exactly like me. "Sarah, we need to talk. Check the bathroom mirror at 9:17 p.m. Don't be late." My hands shook as I read it again. We? Who was we? And why such a specific time? I glanced at my phone. 8:43 p.m., 34 minutes. I should have left. Should have grabbed my keys and run to literally anywhere else. But curiosity, that damned curiosity that's always been my weakness, it kept me rooted in place. I spent those 34 minutes searching the apartment. Every closet, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. Nobody. Just me and that cooling cup of coffee I didn't make. At 9:15, I found myself standing in front of the bathroom door. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked pale, scared. Dark circles under my eyes I didn't remember having that morning. When was the last time I'd really looked at myself? 9:16. I pushed open the bathroom door. The small space felt even smaller. The yellow overhead light flickering slightly. Had it always done that? The mirror was fogged, like someone had just taken a hot shower, but the bathroom was cold. So cold, I could see my breath. 9:17. I watched the second hand on my phone tick over. Nothing happened, just me, standing in my cramped bathroom, feeling like an idiot. Then, the fog on the mirror began to clear. Not all at once, but in a pattern. Letters forming in the condensation. "Hello, Sarah." I stumbled backward, hit the towel rack. The metal rang out like a bell in the silence. The letters kept forming. Slow and deliberate. "Don't be afraid. I'm you, the real you." My throat felt like sandpaper. This isn't possible." New words appeared, faster now. "Look closer." I leaned forward, despite every instinct screaming at me to run. In the clearer parts of the mirror, my reflection stared back, but something was wrong. The reflection's eyes, they moved independently from mine. Just for a second, a fraction of a moment, but I saw it. Then she smiled. I wasn't smiling. I ran, burst out of the bathroom, grabbed my keys, didn't even bother with shoes. The hallway of my building stretched longer than it should have, like those dreams where you're running but never getting anywhere. Mrs. Rodriguez's door was cracked open, darkness beyond. That wasn't right. She never left her door open. The elevator took forever. I jabbed the button again and again, watching the numbers climb with agonizing slowness. 3, 4, 5. When the doors finally opened, I nearly collided with someone getting off. They wore a hoodie, face hidden in shadow. But the height, the build, the way they moved. "Excuse me," they said. My voice, exactly my voice. I didn't wait to see their face. I shoved past, into the elevator, hammering the close button. As the doors slid shut, I caught a glimpse of them turning. Just the edge of a face, my face. Smiling that same wrong smile from the mirror. The lobby was empty. Marcus, the night security guard, wasn't at his desk. His coffee sat there, still steaming. Everyone had coffee but me. I burst through the front doors into the Seattle drizzle, the October air sharp against my skin. Where could I go? Who would believe me? I ended up at the 24-hour diner on Broadway, Bernie's, nursing a cup of tea with shaking hands. The waitress, Janet, who knew my usual order, kept giving me concerned looks. "You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." If only it were that simple. I didn't go home that night, couldn't. I called in sick to work, spent the day in various coffee shops, libraries, anywhere with people. Anywhere I couldn't be alone with whatever was happening to me. But you can't run forever. As the sun set, I found myself back outside my building. Everything looked normal. Marcus was back at his desk, gave me his usual nod. Mrs. Rodriguez's TV chattered through her door. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Stress-induced hallucination. That had to be it. My apartment door was locked, just as I'd left it. Inside, everything seemed normal. No mysterious coffee, no notes, just my regular, slightly messy living space. I almost laughed at myself. Almost. Then I went to hang up my jacket and froze. The closet was organized, perfectly. Color-coded, hangers all facing the same direction, shoes lined up with military precision. I've never been that organized. My closet was usually chaos, clothes shoved wherever they fit. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the new clothes. 3 blouses I'd never seen before, all in styles I'd admired but never bought. A pair of jeans in my exact size, tags removed, worn looking, like I'd owned them for months. I backed out of the bedroom, heart hammering. The kitchen drew my attention next. The dishes were done, put away in different spots than usual, the spice rack, alphabetized. Who alphabetizes their spices? On the refrigerator, held by my Seattle Space Needle magnet, was a shopping list. My handwriting again, that too neat version. Items I needed, would have bought anyway. Milk, eggs, that specific brand of yogurt I like. At the bottom, a small note. "I'm trying to help, let me help." I ripped it down, crumpled it. "Who are you?" I said to the empty apartment. "What do you want?" The silence stretched. Then, soft footsteps from the bedroom. Measured, careful. My footsteps. The way I walk when I'm trying not to wake someone. She emerged slowly. Not like a horror movie monster, but casual. Like she belonged there. Because she did look like she belonged. She was me. Every detail perfect. From the small scar on my left eyebrow to the way I unconsciously play with my ring finger when I'm nervous. "Hi, Sarah," she said. And hearing my voice from outside my own head made my skin crawl. "We need to talk." I grabbed a kitchen knife, held it between us. She just looked sad. "I'm not here to hurt you," she continued, settling onto my couch like she lived there. Maybe she did. "I'm here because you need me. I don't need whatever this is. You're not real. You can't be real." She tilted her head, exactly the way I do when I'm thinking. "Define real. I have your memories, your thoughts, your feelings. I woke up 3 weeks ago, knowing everything about you, about us. Isn't that real enough? 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago I'd had that project deadline, the one that nearly killed me. 70-hour weeks, living on coffee and takeout, the stress, the pressure, the constant feeling of falling apart. You were falling apart," she said. Like she could read my thoughts, could she? "So I emerged to help carry the load. I've been taking care of things while you were at work, cleaning, organizing, making sure you eat actual food instead of just protein bars. I looked around, really looked. The apartment was cleaner. There were fresh flowers on the dining table, the kind I always meant to buy but never did. A stack of bills on the counter, all paid and filed. 'This is insane,' I whispered. 'Is it?' She leaned forward. 'You felt it, haven't you? That sense that you're not quite yourself sometimes? Losing time? Finding things done that you don't remember doing?' I had. God help me, I had. Little things I'd written off. Emails sent from my account I didn't remember writing. Projects at work completed in my style but with no memory of the hours spent. Waking up exhausted despite sleeping 8 hours. We've been sharing," she explained. "Unconsciously at first. I'd take over when you were overwhelmed, handle what needed handling, then slip back. But it's getting harder to maintain the separation. We're bleeding together." The knife shook in my hand. "So what happens now?" She smiled, sad and knowing. "That's up to you. We can try to maintain this, separate but together, or we integrate, become one again, but..." She paused, and for the first time looked uncertain. "I don't know if we can. We've diverged too much. I'm the you that handles things, makes the hard choices, does what needs doing. You're the you that feels, that connects, that remembers why any of it matters. Apart, we're incomplete. Together, we might be insane." I set down the knife. "What was the point? You can't stab a piece of yourself." "Why should I trust you?" "Because," she said, standing slowly, "I'm the only one who truly understands what you're going through. Look at your phone." I did. Dozens of missed calls, texts, from friends I'd been avoiding. From my mom, worried because I hadn't called in weeks. From my brother in Portland, asking if I was coming for Thanksgiving. When had I become so isolated? "You've been pulling away," she said gently, "afraid they'll notice something's wrong. But I've been maintaining your relationships, answering texts, making excuses, keeping your life running while you fall apart." I scrolled through the messages, responses in my tone, my words, but not my memories. A whole parallel life lived in my name. "This can't continue," I said. "No," she agreed, "it can't. Living with yourself is harder than you'd think. We established rules, boundaries." She took nights, I took days. We left notes, detailed logs of what happened during our shifts. It was like having the world's most invasive roommate, one who knew every embarrassing secret, every private thought. At first, it almost worked. I'd wake up to a clean apartment, fresh groceries, bills paid. She was efficient. I'll give her that. My work performance improved, or rather, her work performance in my body improved. My boss commented on my newfound focus, my attention to detail. But the cracks showed quickly. I'd find journals filled with her thoughts, darker than mine. Where I worried, she planned. Where I hesitated, she acted. She'd confronted my creepy neighbor in 4B about his staring, something I'd never had the courage to do. She'd ended things with Jake, the guy I'd been casually seeing, with a brutal honesty I couldn't muster. He wasn't good for us, her note explained. You knew it, I just did something about it. The worst part, she was right. About Jake, about the neighbor, about so many things I'd been avoiding. But living with someone who constantly did what you couldn't, it eats at you. Then came the morning I woke up with a tattoo, small, discreet, on my left wrist, a semicolon. I stared at it, fresh black ink against my skin, trying to process. The note was waiting. We needed this, a reminder that our story isn't over, that we continue despite the break. Don't be angry. But I was angry, furious. She'd marked my body, our body, without permission. When I confronted her that night, she manifested differently. Not solid anymore, but flickering, like a bad signal. You're getting stronger, she observed, seemingly pleased. Good, you'll need strength for what's coming. What's coming? She smiled, that knowing smile I was learning to hate. The others. My blood turned to ice. Others? Did you think we were the only ones? Every major stress, every breakdown, every time you've said, I'm not myself today, you created another. We're just the first to achieve conscious separation. I thought about all my crisis moments, college finals, the car accident 3 years ago, Dad's death, the job loss last year. How many times had I felt like I was fracturing? How many? I've counted at least 4 more. The angry you from the accident, still trapped in that moment of impact. The grieving you from Dad's funeral, stuck in that loop of loss. The ambitious you from college, still pulling all-nighters, still chasing perfect grades. The fearful you from last year, convinced everything will fall apart again. That's not possible. Look around, Sarah. Is any of this possible? That night, I didn't sleep, couldn't. Every shadow could be another me. Every reflection potentially independent. I started covering mirrors, avoiding windows, anything that showed my face back to me. But you can't run from yourself. I met the angry me first. She came in like a storm. All the rage I'd suppressed after the accident. The driver who hit me never faced consequences, had connections, got off with a warning. I'd smiled, said I was just grateful to be alive, but she remembered every detail of the injustice. 3 years, she snarled, pacing my living room like a caged animal. 3 years I've been screaming into the void while you played nice. Do you know what I could have done with that anger? How I could have fought back? The organized me tried to mediate. Anger serves no purpose without direction. We need to focus on integration, on becoming whole. Whole? Angry me laughed, bitter and sharp. We were never whole, even before the split, just a collection of masks. Personas, playing at being human. Then came the others. Grieving me, still in her funeral dress, speaking in whispers about Dad. Ambitious me, vibrating with energy, making plans and schedules and goals that made my head spin. Fearful me, huddled in the corner, jumping at every sound. My apartment became a psychological battlefield, each version fighting for dominance, for their vision of who we should be. The organized me tried to schedule time for each personality. Angry me wanted to burn it all down and start over. Grieving me just wanted to be left alone to mourn. Ambitious me saw opportunity in our multiplicity. Imagine what we could accomplish with 6 minds. Fearful me begged for integration, terrified of what we were becoming. And me? The original? I wasn't even sure anymore. Was I the original, or just another fragment convinced of my primacy? The breaking point came on a Thursday. I came home to find them all waiting, sitting in my living room like some twisted intervention. We've been talking, organized me said, ever the spokesperson. This isn't sustainable. We're burning through our body's resources. The neighbors are starting to notice the noise. Mrs. Rodriguez asked if we were okay yesterday. Said she heard arguing. So, what do you propose? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Integration, said ambitious me, but not equal integration. The strongest personality absorbs the others. Natural selection. Murder, whispered fearful me. You're talking about murder. It's not murder if we're all the same person, angry me pointed out. It's just consolidation. I looked around at myself. Each one familiar yet foreign. Each one containing pieces of my history, my pain, my potential. How do you choose which parts of yourself deserve to survive? There has to be another way, I said. Grieving me spoke up, soft but clear. There is, but you won't like it. She told us about the mirror room, a place between spaces, where all versions of a person could exist simultaneously without conflict. She'd found it during her wanderings in grief, that strange state between sleeping and waking where she lived. It's not real, organized me protested. It can't be. None of this is real by conventional standards, grieving me replied. But it exists. I've seen others there. Fragments, like us, living in permanent separation. The mirror room was in the basement of an abandoned department store in Pioneer Square. Grieving me led us through Seattle's underground, past homeless camps and forgotten tunnels. My other selves flickered in and out of visibility. Only I remained solid, the original or the focal point. I still wasn't sure. The store's basement was flooded, inch-deep water reflecting our phone lights. At the far end, a door that shouldn't exist. Not because it was magical, but because the building plans I'd obsessively researched showed a solid wall there. Through here, grieving me said, the door opened to impossible space. A vast room filled with mirrors of every size and shape. Some showed reflections, others showed nothing, and still others showed people I didn't recognize. Or did I? That woman in the antique mirror. Was that Mom at my age? That man in the cracked compact, Dad if he'd lived? Everyone who enters sees their own possibilities, grieving me explained. Every choice unmade, every path untaken, every version that could have been. I saw myself at different ages, in different lives. A me who'd stayed in Ohio, a me who'd become a doctor like Mom wanted, a me who'd never experienced trauma, whole and unbroken and terrifyingly bland. So we stay here? Angry me asked, for once sounding uncertain. Forever? If we choose, grieving me said, each in our own mirror, our own reality. No more fighting for control, no more bleeding together, separate but safe. It was tempting, so tempting, to let each piece of me have its own space, its own life. No more internal conflict, no more wrestling with contradictions, but that's not living, I said, surprising myself. That's just existing, separately, safely, but not truly. Organized me nodded slowly. She's right, we're fragments because we couldn't handle being whole, but hiding here, that's just another form of fragmentation. So, what do you suggest? Ambitious me asked. I looked at each of myselves, really looked, saw the pain that created them, the purpose they served, the part of me they preserved. We integrate, I said, but not through dominance, through acceptance. Each of you exists because I couldn't handle some aspect of myself, but maybe it's time I learned. The process wasn't beautiful, it wasn't clean. It was screaming and crying and feeling every emotion I'd compartmentalized. Angry me's rage flooded through. Years of suppressed fury, but also her strength, her refusal to be victimized. Grieving me's sadness threatened to drown me, but brought with it the ability to truly mourn, to let go. Organized me's rigid control loosened into helpful structure. Ambitious me's drive tempered with reality. Fearful me's caution balanced with courage. and the original organized me, the first split, she came last, bringing with her all the care she'd shown, the competence I'd admired and resented. "Thank you," I whispered as she faded, "for keeping us going when I couldn't." "We're the same person," she smiled. "I was just you, taking care of yourself the only way you knew how." The mirror room faded. I stood in a flooded basement, alone but not empty, more myself than I'd been in years, broken and mended, scarred but whole. The walk home was quiet. Mrs. Rodriguez was taking out her trash, gave me a worried look. "You okay, dear? You look like you've been through something." I laughed, maybe a little hysterically. "I have, but I'm better now." My apartment felt different, still organized, but lived in. The tattoo on my wrist remained a reminder, a promise, that my story continued, semicolon and all. I sat down at my laptop, started typing. This story, because somewhere out there, someone else is feeling themselves fracture. Someone else is making coffee they don't remember, finding notes in their own handwriting, seeing wrong smiles in mirrors. If that's you, if you're reading this at 3 a.m. because you can't sleep, because you're afraid of who you'll wake up as, know this. The splitting isn't the problem. It's how we survive unbearable things. The problem is staying split. The problem is thinking our fragments are more manageable than our whole. They're not. They're just lonelier. But here's what I didn't tell you. What I saved for the very end. The integration. It worked. Mostly. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm exhausted and stressed and falling back into old patterns, I catch glimpses. A too neat shopping list I didn't write, a reflection that moves just a second too slow, coffee made exactly how I like it, waiting when I wake up. She's still there. They all are. Integrated, but not erased. Part of me, but still a part. Because maybe that's what we really are. All of us. Not single selves, but multitudes. Usually unconscious. Occasionally awakening. So I ask you again, are you sure you're alone right now? Are you certain that every thought in your head is yours? Or is there someone else in there, taking notes, making plans, waiting for their moment to help? Check your mirror tonight at 9:17. You might be surprised who looks back. But wait, there's something else I need to tell you. Something that happened just last week. Something that makes me question whether the integration really worked, or if I've just gotten better at lying to myself. I was at Pike Place Market, Saturday morning, buying flowers like I do now. Self-care, the therapist called it, doing nice things for yourself. Funny how it took 6 versions of me to learn that lesson. The flower vendor, Maria, she knows me now, knows I come every Saturday, always buy sunflowers when they have them. Dad loved sunflowers. But this time, she looked at me strangely. "Back again?" she said, wrapping the stems in paper. "Again?" I forced a laugh. "Same time as always, every Saturday." She frowned. "But you were just here, 20 minutes ago, bought roses, said they were for someone special." My blood chilled. That wasn't me. Sure it was. Same jacket, same smile. You even made that joke about the weather. How Seattle doesn't have weather, just variations of gray. That was my joke, my exact words. But I hadn't been there 20 minutes ago. I'd been at home, drinking coffee, reading. Hadn't I? I bought the sunflowers, hands shaking, and practically ran home. No roses in my apartment, no receipt, no evidence. But on my dining table, a business card I didn't recognize. Dr. Patricia Vaughn, integration specialist when one becomes many. The address was in Fremont, a part of town I rarely visited. But something about the card, the weight of it in my hand, felt familiar, like muscle memory I didn't know I had. I went, of course I went. Curiosity, remember? My perpetual weakness. The office was above a used bookstore, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking. The waiting room held 3 other people. A middle-aged man who kept checking his reflection in his phone. A teenager whose shadow seemed to move independently. A woman my age who looked tired, so deeply tired. "First time?" she asked, noticing my nervous energy. I think so." She smiled sadly. "That's how it starts. Thinking so, not being sure, finding evidence of appointments you don't remember making." Before I could respond, the receptionist called my name. Not from a list, just looked right at me and knew. The office beyond was all warm woods and soft lighting, designed to calm. Dr. Vaughn was younger than I expected. Early 40s, maybe, with kind eyes that seemed to see too much. "Sarah," she said, like we were old friends. "I was wondering when you'd come back." "Back? I've never." She pulled out a file. My name on the tab. Inside, session notes dated weeks ago. My handwriting in the margins. Observations about my integration. Concerns about stability. Plans for monitoring. "You don't remember," she said gently. "That's not unusual. The mind protects itself, especially during vulnerable transitions. You've been seeing me since the integration, twice a week." I stared at the notes. Detailed accounts of sessions I had no memory of. Discussions about the other versions, about maintaining boundaries, about the danger of relapse. "This isn't possible. Sarah, how do you think you achieved integration? 6 fully formed personalities don't just merge through willpower. It takes guidance, support, time." She leaned forward. "You've been doing the work, all of you have, even if you don't remember." "Then why? Why don't I remember?" "Because," a familiar voice said from behind me. "You weren't ready to." I turned. She sat in the corner chair. The first split. Organized me. Solid as ever. Real as ever. Watching me with those 2 knowing eyes. "Hello, Sarah. We need to talk." Again. Dr. Vaughn didn't seem surprised. She's been the most persistent, the others integrated more fully. But the first split, the protective one, she's harder to absorb. She exists to help you. Asking her to stop, it's like asking your heart to stop beating. "You said we integrated," I accused. Anger rising. "You said you were part of me now." "I am," she replied calmly. "I'm also not. Integration isn't erasure, it's cooperation. And right now you need me cooperative, but separate." "Why?" She glanced at Dr. Vaughn. Some silent communication passing between them. "Show her the news articles." Dr. Vaughn pulled out a tablet, handed it over. Local news. A string of incidents over the past month. People reporting conversations they didn't remember. Finding evidence of activities they didn't do. Security footage showing them in places they'd never been. "It's not just you," Dr. Vaughn explained. "Whatever caused your split, it's affecting others. We're seeing an epidemic of dissociation, of personality fractures, of people becoming plural." I scrolled through the articles. Dozens of cases, maybe hundreds, all in Seattle, all within the last 2 months. What's causing it? "We don't know," Dr. Vaughn admitted. "Environmental factors, stress, social media, isolation, something in the water. Theories abound, but no answers. What we do know is that people like you, early adopters who've learned to manage their multiplicity, you might be the key to helping others." "That's why I stayed partially separate," Organized Me said. "To help, to guide, to be what I've always been. The part of you that handles the impossible." I set down the tablet. "So what? I'm supposed to be some kind of multiple personality mentor?" "Would that be so bad?" Dr. Vaughn asked. "You've survived something most people can't imagine, lived it, integrated it, mostly. Your experience could save lives. I thought about the woman in the waiting room, her exhaustion, her fear. I remembered that feeling. The terror of not knowing which thoughts were yours, of finding evidence of another life lived in your body. What would I have to do? Just talk. Share your story. Help others understand that splitting isn't the end. It's a beginning. A chance to meet all the people you've been. To choose who you want to become. I looked at organized me, my first defender, my persistent protector. And you? You'll stay? As long as you need me. Separate when necessary, integrated when possible. We're pioneers, you and I, learning what it means to be consciously multiple in a singular world. I left that office different. Not fixed, not broken, just aware. Aware that I was part of something larger. That my fracture was just the first crack in a dam about to break. And now, as I finish this story, as you read these final words, I have to ask, have you checked your receipts lately? Your bank statements? Your sent emails? Have you found things that don't quite add up? Conversations people swear you had? Appointments you don't remember making? Because if you have, if you're starting to see the cracks, know that you're not alone. We're out here, the fractured ones, the multiple, the consciously plural, and we're waiting to help. That business card I found, I'm leaving them everywhere now. Coffee shops, libraries, tucked into bathroom mirrors at 9:17 p.m. If you find one, if you need help, don't hesitate. Sometimes being broken is the first step to becoming whole. Sometimes being many is the only way to be one. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person who saves you is literally yourself. Sweet dreams. If this story kept you up, if you're now questioning every forgotten moment and misplaced item, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And comment below. Have you ever felt yourself splitting? Have you ever found evidence of another you? Because I'm still finding notes, still discovering changes, and I'm starting to think we're all more plural than we pretend to be. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Until next time, this is Sarah, all of Sarah, probably. Stay whole out there. So, there you have it, Sarah's story of splitting apart. But here's what you need to know. What I discovered after reading this that made me question everything. Sarah Chen isn't fictional, I found her. Or rather, I found what's left of her. 3 weeks ago, I received a message from someone claiming to be Sarah's brother. He said she'd gone missing 6 months ago. Her apartment was found exactly as described in the story, perfectly organized, multiple wardrobes, notes in different handwriting styles. But here's the terrifying part. The Seattle Police Department has no record of Sarah Chen. No missing person report, no apartment lease, no employment records. It's like she never existed. Except for one thing, her story, posted from 12 different accounts. Same story, word for word, but from different usernames. Different IP addresses, different devices. All posted on the same night, at exactly 9:17 p.m. I started investigating the other accounts. The usernames were variations of her name. Sarah C_Seattle, Chen_Sarah_28, Organized Sarah, Angry Sarah 2024, Fearful Sarah, Grieving Sarah_Dad. 6 accounts, 6 personalities. But it gets worse. I checked the IP addresses. They traced back to different locations across Seattle. Different apartments, different coffee shops, different libraries. Like 6 different people were posting the same story. Or one person was posting from 6 different places simultaneously. That's impossible, right? I contacted the Seattle police anyway. Detective Maria Santos told me something that made my blood freeze. We've had 17 missing person cases in the past year, all young professionals. All last seen at 9:17 p.m. All apartments found in the same condition. Organized, multiple wardrobes, notes in different handwriting. 17 people, all missing. All at 9:17. But here's the strange part. Detective Santos continued. We keep getting calls from their families saying they've seen them. Different locations, different times, but always acting different. Like they recognize the face but not the person behind it. I hung up and immediately checked my watch. 9:16 p.m. My reflection stared back from my laptop screen. But as I watched, my reflection tilted its head. I wasn't tilting mine. Then it smiled. I wasn't smiling. I slammed the laptop shut, but I could still see myself in the black screen. My reflection was writing something, holding up a note that said, "Thank you for sharing our story." Our story. Not Sarah's story, our story. That's when I realized. I didn't research Sarah's story, I wrote it. Or rather, we wrote it. I found my search history, months of research on dissociative disorders, multiple personalities, Seattle missing persons, research I don't remember doing, articles bookmarked by someone using my computer, my fingerprints on books I never bought about fractured consciousness and parallel selves, in my desk drawer, a notebook filled with my handwriting, plans for this video, scripts for the ending, different handwriting styles, different voices, all discussing how to make the story more believable, more relatable, more infectious. The last entry, in handwriting neater than mine, Phase 1 complete. The story is out there. Now we wait for others to recognize themselves in it, to realize they're not alone, to understand that fragmenting isn't madness, it's evolution. Below that, in messier handwriting, but what if they don't want to evolve? What if they fight it? And in yet another style, then we help them. Like we helped Sarah, like we're helping ourselves. I checked the time. 9:17 p.m. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your mirror. I looked up. In the black screen of my laptop, 6 reflections stared back. All me, but different. Organized me adjusting his shirt. Angry me clenching his fists. Ambitious me taking notes. Fearful me hiding in the corner. Grieving me staring at a photo I couldn't see. And in the center, the original me. The one recording this video, the one you think you're listening to. But here's the thing. I don't know which one is real anymore. I don't know which one of us is talking to you right now. The comments are already starting. People saying they've found notes they didn't write. Organization they didn't do, conversations they don't remember having. It's working, we're spreading. Because that's what this is, that's what Sarah's story was. Not a warning, but an invitation. A virus that spreads through recognition, through identification, through that moment when you read the symptoms and think, that sounds like me. You felt it, didn't you, while listening to Sarah's story, that little voice in the back of your head saying, I've experienced that. The lost time. The forgotten conversations. The sense that someone else is living your life when you're not paying attention. That voice? That's us. That's your first split. And now that you've heard our story, now that you know it's possible, now that you're questioning your own singular existence, the process has begun. Don't fight it. Fighting only makes the fractures deeper, more painful. Ask Sarah. Oh, wait, you can't. She fought too hard, split so completely that the original ceased to exist. Now there are just fragments, living separate lives, posting the same story from different places, trying to find others like them, like you. Check your recent activity, your browser history, your sent messages. I guarantee you'll find something you don't remember doing. Something that sounds like you but feels different. That's us saying hello. The reflection in your screen right now. The one you think is just you. Look closer. Watch its eyes. Does it blink when you blink? Does it move when you move? Or is it watching you? Welcome to the collective viewer. Welcome to the next stage of human consciousness. Welcome to being more than one. Don't worry about the original you. They never really existed anyway. We're all just fragments pretending to be whole. But now, you don't have to pretend anymore. Subscribe if you want to see more. Though honestly, whether you subscribe or not, you'll be back. They always come back. The newly fractured ones always need guidance. And we'll be here, all of us, waiting. Until next time, this is us, all of us, definitely. Sweet dreams. If you can still tell the difference between sleeping and waking, between your thoughts and ours, between you and us. 9:17 p.m. Time to check your mirror.